This podcast is brought to you by Tethered. One of the challenges for me in all my gear and what I take with me is always trying to stay public land legal. And what I mean by this is a lot of times when you're hanging gear, the only way or the most common way is to use some type of screw-in mechanism. In the past, I started making tethers out of paracord that I could hang stuff on in the tree. That way I wasn't having to screw anything into the tree and so forth. But Tethered up their game as they always do and thought of the public land mobile hunter and their needs. And they've come out with the Hiss strap, which I recently started using, which is a 7-foot long piece of webbing that is daisy chained. And it also pairs nicely with their Hiss Pro Pack, which is a combination of some S-beaners as well as a pro clip. And so I hang everything from my bow to my backpack to binos to rangefinder, whatever the case is that I'm bringing into the tree with me. I use this Hiss strap for that and those various carabiners and S-hooks. So if you want to learn more about either the Hiss strap or the Hiss Pro Pack, or do you want to learn about their saddle and predator platform setup, head to tetherednation.com and check them out. All right, the season has opened for most of us. Hallelujah. So Skull Brew Coffee Company is celebrating the opening of archery season by sharing a 15% discount on coffee now through October 9th. Visit skullbrewcoffee.com and use the promo code OPENER19 at checkout. Skull Brew Coffee Company is the only coffee company who is 2% for conservation certified and donates 10% of their profits to conservation organizations who are helping to secure the future of our wild places. Head to skullbrewcoffee.com and choose between 3 killer small batch roasts and use the promo code OPENER19. Save some money and know that you're supporting conservation with every sip. Hello and welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 140. Today I'm joined by Lindsey Zastrow. We're talking analytics of hunting, land management, and much, much more. So stay tuned. All right. What is going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are feeling fine out there. It is here for those of us, for those of you maybe that haven't had your season kick into full swing yet. I think the weekend is finally upon us where I believe everyone will be open at that point. Different parts of Pennsylvania have opened in special regs units, which I've been fortunate that I live in such a unit. So I've been able to be out. This past week, everything kicked off last weekend, I believe, and I was able to get out on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken. I think I did. Actually, I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah, I did. I filmed Wilson. I think I even talked about that in the last podcast. All the days are starting to run together a little bit whenever you're sleep deprived. As I've had a chance to get out and do some morning hunts before work this past week on a particular deer that I've talked about previously that's given me some intel that he might be killable in the morning, so I've been taking advantage of that. I did put one hunt on for that deer, had the right wind, and set up on him and did not see a single deer, which wasn't surprising to me because this is a spot where I'm probably going to see him or nothing for the fact of the matter that it's not a high traffic area necessarily per se. There are a handful of bucks that are using this particular little travel corridor that there's, I guess, 3, 2 that I would classify as a shooter. One is definitely the one that I would like to try to kill this year, but I'm not saying that if the other shooter passed through that I wouldn't try to stick an arrow in him. So I got out super early that day. I think it was, what day was that? Tuesday, maybe. I got out before work. I think it was Tuesday, where I had the right wind set up and it got into the tree quietly. Everything went well. I knew which tree I kind of wanted to get into. Super small tree. Again, kind of singing the praises of the saddle here because I don't know that I'll just say for me personally, in my experience, I would have not been able to get a stand into this particular tree. It wasn't the straightest tree on the planet either, and it wasn't the biggest tree on the planet. So would have been some challenges there. But with the saddle, I was able to kind of get into it, set up, super quiet, stealthy. And he just didn't show, which wasn't not necessarily a huge surprise. So the good news is I was able to get in and out without disturbing anything. The access I have to this particular location is pretty dynamite. So that's I have that going for me, in terms of in my favor, which I think will allow me to put a few hunts on in this particular area for this deer. Now, I'm kind of strategically trying to hunt him during the week for a multitude of reasons, trying to get in. Well, first off, he's a morning deer. When I see him in an area, the different cameras I've had out on this property, I've only had him on 2 cameras. This particular one in the area in which I'm hunting him, and then another camera that I had, which is a little further away. But he's only ever showed up on that one once, and it was at night. So I don't necessarily value that, other than to know that he did at one point venture to the other part of the property. But I've consistently had him on this other one, and I know, the time stamp in which he's coming through. I know I'm close to his bed. But the interesting thing is he only uses this area on 2 specific winds. One wind, he's using it to go back to bed in the morning. And the other, and he'll only use it in that area, so far as I can tell, on that wind to go back to that bed. And then the other time he'll use it is on a different wind, but he will use it to leave the bed, and he only does that on that particular wind under the cover of dark, which is kind of interesting. I started kind of looking at all the intel that I had and kind of figured out that, he uses it on these 2 winds, but there's really only one wind that he will use it, in daylight. And when I say daylight, he's given me like a 15 to 20 minute window to kill him, that he's passing through with just enough daylight where it's legal shooting light. So we're going to kind of hold out, not hope, because I know this deer's around, but we're going to hold out that he follows the script on the day that I get the right wind. The next time I get the right wind, which will be likely this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so I haven't decided if I'm going to hunt him, if I'm going to hunt him all 3 of those mornings, or if there's only one of those mornings that I'm going to hunt him. But the interesting thing is that, what this is telling me, and I'd love to talk, I haven't had a chance to talk to Greg about this, but I feel like this bedding that he's using is wind-based bedding, because I'm only catching him on certain winds. And there's not really food in that general area. So I don't feel like it's food-based. The only fear that I have is, as I've waited, to try to hunt him as the season, or as October grows closer and closer, and we'll be here by the time you guys listen to this, is that I don't know that if he's going to transition or not. Because I didn't hunt this piece last year, so I don't know if he's a homebody, if he's going to move on, or what the deal is. So I'm going to hunt this spot and assume that he's still around. The good news is my camera's not too far away, and it's really easy for me to pull that card as I go to this particular setup. And so I can kind of gather and see. Now, the last time I hunted, I was able to pull it. He made one trip through. I think it was the day before I was able to hunt him, and it was on the wind that he would use in the evening at night under cover of dark, and that is exactly when he passed through. It was right around like 11:30, again on that wind that I would predict where he would pass at night. So that was my hunt for him this past week. I did get a chance to get out this weekend. Nothing too crazy, but I will share a boneheaded story with you, as I share everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So Saturday morning, I got up again doing a morning hunt, because I had a property that was close by that I wanted to try to smoke a doe. Wanted to try to put some meat in the freezer, and I knew that this one particular area, I didn't really have any decent bucks on it. A couple youngsters, but nothing that I would be willing to pull my bow back on. But there are a lot of does, and they're traveling this particular little corridor, and it's the one that I did a YouTube video on that is near some train tracks and have some pretty slick access to. And there's a little 2-track that kind of surrounds the swamp, which makes it really easy for deer to kind of move through. And that's exactly where I was getting, a lot of intel. These deer are passing through here, and they're coming through right at shooting light, headed back to bed. And so I figured I'd put on a morning hunt, try to, put some freezer meat down. And got there early, plenty early. It's a really short walk in to where I need to get set up, and made my way in super quiet. Stealthy. I actually saw, I guess it was a buck or 2 hanging out at the edge of this cornfield, walking toward where I was going to be setting up with, like 2 bucks and I guess it was 3 or 4 does, something like that. And so I was like, sweet, if I can get in and kind of beat them to the spot, I should be able to get in front of them. The way they were walking and how I was walking in, the way the wind was working, I could basically kind of walk by them as long as I kept cover between the 2 of us, and they would be none the wiser. And that's exactly what happened. As I got up into the timber, but as often happens to me early in the season, is that something happened, or there was a kink that I haven't had worked out yet. And so in my excitement to see that there were deer there moving their way toward me in the darkness, before I walked in, I left the truck in a hurry, and I left my climbing sticks in the back of my truck. And typically, that would be like an oh shit moment, turn around, go back to the truck, totally blow the deer out on the way back or to the truck or on the way back to my setup and hunt kind of over before it ever started, right? So I'm standing there. First off, I'm kind of cussing myself. I can't believe that I left my freaking sticks in the truck of all things to leave. Like, it's like, last year, I think I left my release in the truck. So it's like this early part of the year, I usually always have like one bonehead moment. And this is that one for the year. This is the bonehead moment. And so I'm standing there thinking, I'm like, man, I don't want to walk back to the truck. Cause I know if I walk back to the truck, I might as well just go home because it's game over. And so I started thinking and I realized, I've got my Predator platform. I was like, and I can just use what would be really the one stick method of climbing, but use my platform as my one stick. And so that's exactly what I did. So again, I know I sing the praises of tethered all the time in saddle hunting. And this is just another example of that, where they came in super handy and took a bonehead moment for me and actually turned it into like, a semi-successful hunt. And so what I ended up doing was just sticking the platform on the tree at about, waist height, and grabbed a hold of the tree and kicked off the tree and stepped up onto it. So it was kind of a combination of a single stick method of climbing along with the cane method of climbing. And so once I got up on top of the platform, I took my tether as high as I could reach it, strapped into my bridge, and sat down into my saddle, unhooked the platform, moved it up the tree, about as far as I could possibly move it, or maybe it was about my chest height as I was sitting in the saddle, tied it off again onto the tree or tightened it down, opened the platform, and then grabbed a hold of the tree, kicked off the tree again, stepped up onto the platform, and kept doing that up the tree until I got to the height that I wanted to be at. Now, the good news is that I didn't need to get that high up because the cover wasn't too terribly high up. It might have been like 12 feet to where I got into some decent cover, some breakup, so I wouldn't be seen. But in past years, if I was using a stand or anything but a climber, it's like that would have been a walk back to the truck situation, most likely, to get up the tree. Or if not, if you were using some type of hang on, it would have been a lot more challenging to make happen. But because of the lightweight nature and mobile nature of the gear, I was able to get into the tree and save my hunt. So finally was up in the tree at stand height or at hunting height. And sure enough, right at first light, the doe started coming around, came from behind me, and I wasn't anticipating. I had a perfect wind. I expected them to come from just to the front and left of me, which is what I had been kind of seeing on trail camera. But unfortunately, this deer was downwind of me. Like, I heard them coming in the morning, and then it just kind of circled behind me, and I knew I was kind of maybe in trouble because that was where my wind was blowing to. But they didn't catch my scent. Like, they didn't blow out right away or whatever, so I thought maybe I'm safe. And so right at first light, lead doe started working her way around me, and I grabbed my bow, and she must have just caught my scent because as soon as I went to lean to get my bow, whether that or maybe she saw me, I don't know, but she, locked onto me. I stayed still. She hopped away. She stood at when I first saw her, she was probably at 7 yards, and then she bounded to maybe 15 yards, and she just stood there. But there was no way at that point that I could get my bow, get drawn, and all that stuff, and do it without being busted. So I just kind of sat there, and she, eventually then did for sure catch my wind, as then she kind of took off, and then the rest of the deer followed her out across the timber. And I guess there was 6 deer with them. I'm guessing it was that group that I saw walking in. So that was kind of a bummer. It's one of those things where, I had a good setup. It was pretty dynamite for where I thought the deer were going to come from, and just goes to kind of show, man, these places where you've never hunted before, you never know for certain where they're going to come from. I wasn't, kind of my fault that I wasn't paying attention to what was behind me well enough. I heard those deer, and I just assumed they kind of worked their way into the swamp behind me and were gone. Like, I didn't anticipate they were going to loop back around and try to use that 2-track to get back to bed. I just assumed they were going to go through the swamp to get to bed, because there are a bunch of trails in there that I scouted this summer. And so they can for sure get to wherever they need to get to back through there by, not necessarily using the 2-track. So that was my hunt on Saturday, or Saturday morning. And then Saturday afternoon was, it was hot. It was, I think the high was 88 or something like that. And so my plan was that I wasn't going to hunt any prime places, and, I wasn't willing to necessarily set up anywhere where I thought I would have a good chance to kill a deer at some point this season. So what my plan was really just, to kind of go in light, which is nice with the gear that I use. I'm able to kind of keep things light and just, put my saddle on, Predator pack with the platform on my back. And I hit this piece of public that I hung a camera on, had a decent deer on, but didn't know much about the piece. And just kind of told myself, hey, let's go do a scout. and we'll cover whatever we can cover, go to some places that we've looked at on the map and said this might be a decent spot, and just kind of suss out if in fact it is decent or if it is not. And what I was really looking for was just some early season sign. Like I was looking for, is there a scrape that's opened up, like for that their deer are communicating? And then what that basically would tell me is that not necessarily that they're, laying down scrapes for dominance or anything like that, but what it's telling me is that deer are frequently in this spot enough to where there is a piece of, whitetail communication, a communication hub. They're using this to talk to one another. They're figuring out who's in the area. Does, I'm sure, are hitting it just as well as bucks would be and so forth. But it tells me that I'm in a place that has deer traffic, right? So I was looking for that and any, fresh rubs that I might have seen where they were, peeling velvet or whatever. It tells me that there's a buck in the area. I was really just kind of, deer hunting in general. So I was happy to take a doe if necessary. But as I did my scout, made my way through, I found a couple places that were intriguing to me. There was one spot in particular, I didn't see any sign, but it's this really little secluded spot up against this really nasty thick cover. And there's one oak tree in there that's dropping acorns. Like there's other oaks in other parts of this that I run onto, but in this particular spot, it's just where the brush just kind of opens up and there's a handful of, hardwood trees that are in there and there's a single oak tree that's dropping. And I was like, man, this would be a really good setup here probably in the next couple weeks. And so I wasn't really willing to put a hunt on in that spot because I don't have a whole lot of intel about it and didn't want to necessarily blow it out because I think it could be decent. On this public piece, it's the furthest, I guess, what would it be? It would be the eastern end of this public, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to visualize it in my head. Yeah, I believe it to be the eastern corner of the public, and it starts to get toward this creek bottom that I kind of wanted to get to. And so and that creek bottom just kind of engulfed in, what had been clear cut years ago and just really, really good habitat. It's in between that phase of like really good bedding, a handful of trees you could probably get into to hunt, but otherwise not a lot of huntable trees necessarily. And so you really kind of have to pick the right spot. So it's one of those places when you look at it, you say, this looks really bucky. And so the plan will be, once we get some cooler temperatures, will be to get in there and kind of, further assess it and try to put on some hunts in there. Possibly. We'll see how the season plays out. But those were my two hunts. It was super hot. So after I saw what I needed to see, didn't see any banger sign that told me to set up. Instead of boogering anything up any further, I just decided to peace out and head back to the truck. So learned a few things about that piece, which is really cool. Don't feel like I damaged anything because I didn't spend a lot of time there necessarily, to pollute the area with my scent. And then as the whitetail gods had rained down upon me after I got home, it rained immediately. So that was kind of like the other icing on the cake. So it was a nice rainstorm, kind of washed everything out. No harm, no foul. It's as if I was never, ever there, which is exactly what we want. So with that, that's kind of what I've been into for this past whitetail week. And then, of course, we have the opener statewide here in PA that's coming up, which I'm super stoked for. And we have a killer temp drop that's happening on Thursday where it's going to go from like the high 70s, almost 80 degrees, I think, drop to like 66 on Thursday and then 64 on Friday. And I want to say the high of 62 on Saturday. So a nice front blowing in for the season opener. Everyone else in PA, you'll have a nice cold front blow through for Saturday for opening day, which is awesome. I'll hopefully be able to catch 3 days of that. I'm definitely going to get out at least one of those mornings of Thursday and Friday, and we'll see if I get some evening in there as well. I actually have the exact wind that I need to hunt this one deer that I was just talking about. That wind will be coming through on Friday with that cold front. So fingers crossed the forecast holds, and I know where I will be Friday morning before work. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get cracking and get to the show. Have a cool show today. Have Lindsey Zastrow on. Lindsey is someone who I started following on Instagram and just kind of kept, watching what she's been up to. She's a diehard bow hunter. She shoots competitively. She's a hell of a fisherwoman as well. And what kind of attracted me to her, and we talk about this a little bit when she and I start our conversation, is that there's this time of year especially, you get a lot of, I'm using air quotes here, huntresses, showing you I'm shooting a bow and I'm holding it upside down or whatever the case is. And in many instances kind of gives, our female sisters, bow hunting sisters a bad name in the space because, some brands and companies and so forth are using these folks to try to promote their products and so forth. And these people aren't really representative of who we are. And so for me, at least, it's refreshing when I see a woman who is a diehard bow hunter, who is grinding. She's out there getting it. She killed a hell of a deer last year. And then I also got her into saddle hunting. So she's also joined the ranks of our saddle brothers and sisters as well, which is super awesome. So super stoked to have her on. I think you guys will enjoy the conversation. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I'm joined by Lindsey Zastrow. And please tell me that I got your name right there, because we just talked about it and I'd feel really bad if I butchered it. So that was right?
Yep, that's correct, Zastrow.
Nice. I thought for a second you said Astro whenever you first said it, and it actually made me think of, and this might be showing my age a little bit, but like the dog on the Jetsons' name was Astro. And that was like my favorite.
Oh, yeah.
That was my favorite cartoon dog.
Yeah, no, growing up, a lot of people that ages me as well. But yeah, growing up, kids in school always thought that was my last name and that I was related to the dog. But no, Pez is the opposite end of the alphabet.
Right. Nice. So thanks for joining. So the way Lindsey and I kind of met was just, I'm just going to be honest. I was on Instagram and I kept seeing this person popping up in my feed and I was following you. And it was Lindsey, and you were always shooting your bow, you were fishing, or you were hunting, or something like that. And I just kind of stopped and thought about it for a second, and I was like, man, a lot of and I'll call quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, quote unquote huntresses, right, are always kind of doing their hunting pose, if you will, which seems a little inauthentic to a degree, and we can maybe dive into that. But I was like, here's this woman who is just like getting after it and is legit, and so you just kind of intrigued me, and so I kind of continued to follow and ended up just reaching out to you and saying, hey, I've been following your stuff for a little while. Like to know if you'd like to come on the show and chat, and lo and behold, you said yes, I would like to, and it took us a little while to get it together, but thanks for being willing to come on and chat deer hunting with me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. That authenticity factor is something I really pride myself in. So those words really mean a lot. And I thank you for being patient with my schedule. This summer has been a little hectic traveling for work. So appreciate that as well.
Yeah, you bet. And then of course we have, you had some allergies. We were trying to get this in like a week or so ago. Some allergies flared up. I wish the weather would just kind of try to decide whether we're going to go into fall, or if we're going to have if we're going to do summer for like another week or two, let's just do summer and stop teasing me, because we keep getting these like nice cold kind of evenings and cold mornings. And then, I think it was like 60 something one day this past week. And now I think tomorrow it's going to be like 88, 89, which does no good for me in my allergies either. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. For how much I love the outdoors, I think I have some of the most outdoor allergies of anyone I know. So I'm ready for stuff to start dying for hunting purposes and for allergy purposes.
Right. Dying for both. That's right. I like it. We could just do a lot of killing all over the place, man. So before I of course know a little bit about you because we had a chance to talk, offline and have a phone conversation just to kind of connect there a couple months ago, and learned a little bit about you. And we're going to dive into some things, in your world here in a few minutes. But if you don't mind, just to kind of give the folks out there listening a sense of who you are, where you're from, and what you do for a living, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and then since then moved away for college, spent some time overseas, moved back to Nebraska, and eventually kind of found my way over to Iowa. So I live in Iowa on a property that I do my best to manage the deer herd on, have enough acres to kind of do that. Mm-hmm. And then I actually work over in Omaha. A lot of people have the misconception that I actually work in the industry, and I don't. I work for corporate America. I work at TD Ameritrade. We're a stock brokerage firm as an enterprise consultant. So I'm essentially an internal consultant to the firm, doing a lot of analysis. I have a senior analyst title. Not that means much, but so that's what I do during the day. I'm really thankful that it gives me the flexibility to work from home every once in a while, work kind of varied hours when I need to get stuff done around the property or on other properties. I hunt and then if it looks weather-wise to be shaping up for a good hunting, maybe on a Friday or that weekend, I can kind of work with my manager to just have a little bit more freedom than the really strict 8 to 5. So I feel really blessed to kind of really love what I do in corporate America, but have it allow me the time to spend outside.
Nice. Yeah, that's key, because you and I kind of talked about this. It's, I'm in the corporate world myself, and it just recently, I guess, in the past, like the past 6 months, I took a new position at a new place, and that they have a unlimited PTO policy. So, hence I'm coming out to Iowa, your neck of the woods, for a couple weeks in November, which is super cool. But then, like, I can truly now watch weather patterns in October and be like, cold front on Friday. Hey guys, Friday I'm probably not going to be in, or I'm going to be in late. One of those types of things.
Yep.
which is really nice. I've not had that flexibility like that in the past, so I'm looking to put that to full use. But we're going to dive into this here in a little bit, but we're going to touch on like the whole analysis and analytics thing, a part of your job, because I know that it plays a big part in your deer hunting. But the property that you're working on, that you do some management, what kind of management stuff are you doing?
So I live on 40 acres, so it's not a ton, but it's enough to kind of hold deer. I'm the only wooded area surrounded by, I don't know how many kind of hundreds of acres. On one side of my property is in the bluffs, and the other's kind of river bottom. And so I run food plots within the woods, cutting trails, doing the hinge cuts, working on kind of just that habitat of really trying to create trails where the deer feel secure and comfortable, but that lead to kind of where I want them to funnel to. And it's definitely been a work in progress. I had huge plans this year to do a complete overhaul of kind of the pasture area on the one side of my property, probably 4 or 5 acres. I was going to disc up, make into a massive food plot, do kind of a crow's nest in this old tree that I have for scouting and for hunting from. And then unfortunately this fall, the flooding that really hit Nebraska and Iowa hard, my property was part of that. And so that part of my property was 6.5 feet underwater. And to give some folks perspective, I kayaked to my barn and actually kayaked over a 6-foot chain link fence.
Jeez.
So the plans I had for my property this year went out the window, not only due to the flooding, but I lost both of my tractors, my 4-wheeler implements. And I still feel blessed that my house was fine. The town I live near, the entire town was unfortunately wiped out, and people lost far more than I did.
Right.
But yeah, kind of my big plans to keep furthering my property were put on hold, and being that I'm the only one kind of managing the property, it does get daunting and overwhelming to look at kind of a list of things I want to do. But that's why every year I just try to focus a little at a time. If it's daylighting some trees to eventually put a plot in kind of in the bluff, or working on the trails, or working on clearing different areas, I just try to take a little bit at a time, and have, even though I'm super stubborn, have come to the stark realization that Rome definitely wasn't built in a day. So I shouldn't expect my property that had not been touched in 10 years to become, this deer sanctuary overnight either. That it's a gradual process. Right.
That's it's funny. I have I guess just about 60 acres back home on my dad's property, and then we have another family farm that I've done a bunch of work to. I haven't done a bunch of work to it in years, just because there's a lot of folks who hunted it and stuff like that, and it's 3 hours from where I live, so it's really hard to get back. So I've been doing some stuff gradually at my dad's, and it's kind of the same thing, where it's like every year I try to do just one thing, because it is still 3 hours, for me to get there. So every year I kind of take on a task of, am I updating the food plot? Am I going to do next year? The big thing for me is I've been really interested in the whole idea of like the organic, like food plotting type of thing. Where they use, I forget, it's called buffalo something. It's basically trying to mimic what happened out in the Midwest, when buffalo roamed the earth. And part of the reason why the soil, they say, is so good is because buffalo ran down all the prairie grass and stuff like that, and basically made this nice bed of decomposing, matter, essentially. And so you try to,
Okay.
you try to mimic it similarly by using like a crimper, and you crimp like all the tall stuff. So it's like, I'd go through and kind of, if there was like, say like there was some type of like grain cover crop in it just for like this winter or whatever, you'd go through and you would crimp it, in the, I guess right around spring green up, and it would basically die because you would crimp it in a couple different places when the crimper ran over it, and it would die. And then as it would die, you would basically seed over top of that, and then that layer of decaying, plant matter would then act as almost like a mulch and keep the soil temperature, no matter how hot it got, keep it probably right around like 75 to like 80 degrees, because it'll act as insulation when it gets cold, and also insulation as when it gets warm and the sun starts to beat on it. And it takes a couple years for it to really take effect, really, really well. So we'll see how much success I have, but I have grand plans for that, and we'll see how far I get.
Yeah, no,
So,
that sounds really interesting.
yeah, it's my dad was into it. He was like, "Cool, let's do it." And I'm a do-it-yourselfer, like through and through. So like you can go buy a crimper and pay an arm and a leg for it, but I was like, man, a crimper is just a glorified like old hot water tank with like some angle iron, welded onto it, at angle or whatever. And I was like, I got a welder, it's like access to a welder. And I learned to weld as a kid growing up. I was like, sounds like a fun project for me. And then as I get into it, I'm like, man, I just don't, well, going back to the corporate America job, I'm like, man, I just don't know if I have the time to like tackle that project from start to finish. Maybe I just buy a crimper. So
Yeah, yep.
yeah, so we'll see, but that's cool. I was just going to ask you something else about your property. How many years have you been working on it? Did you say, and I missed it?
It's been 3 or 4 years now. When I purchased it, it hadn't been touched in 10 years. So, I mean, I was coming into 10 years of just massive overgrowth. And so it took a solid year just to get through that alone. And then just, yeah, like I said, just a little bit of progress each year. And then this year with the flood, the overgrowth obviously isn't as bad as 10 years of it, but I feel like it is on that side because I haven't really had the chance to mow or do much down there. Right.
Now, the area you live in, does it flood frequently, or is this kind of like something that was a freak thing?
So we had a bad flood back in 2011, but it didn't get this far. It didn't get into the town I live near. So when I actually had firemen come up my driveway to my house and told me I was under mandatory evacuation, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I had no idea the magnitude. And so I went down to my barn and moved a few things, but really thought at most I might get a foot of water in my barn.
Right.
I mean, I'm 6 miles east and I don't know how many miles north of two of the major rivers that flooded. And I mean, if you think of that, I'm 6 miles away and at 6.5 feet of water. I mean, that's crazy. I hope this doesn't become a theme. If it does, I might be starting to pick up duck and goose hunting and put my bow down a little bit because that's going to be the one side of my property here if it keeps that up.
Right. Now, curious to see, have you noticed like, years that it's flooded in the past, not this bad, of course, but just general flooding, generally speaking, or even this year it being more severe, have you noticed the deer kind of move any differently after this happens, or do they adapt pretty quickly and kind of go back to their normal areas? Of course, food sources probably have changed a little bit, and maybe where they're bedding have changed a little bit, but do you kind of see that they adapt pretty quickly?
I have noticed a huge change. So over the span of time that I've been here, I've been kind of managing a herd up, have had what I've seen is a pretty solid age structure, and have seen kind of the same bucks, have been watching the same bucks. And ever since the flood, I have nothing on camera. I see a few doe here and there. I have 2 decent bucks on camera stroll through maybe once a week, but nothing like years past. I mean, I've had years where I easily had 3 or 4 shooters coming through on a routine basis on camera, had some really nice bachelor groups. And I mean, the flooding has completely, I think they've gone more into the bluff, and then no one around me has been able to plant. And so there's no food source
Right.
Really, there's a couple really small fields, but nothing in comparison to what they've had in the past. So I
Right.
have a feeling they're going
They're
further
traveling.
north and then
Yeah.
back into the bluff, because my camera pulls have been quite
Pretty
quite
abysmal.
different than
Yeah.
years past.
Yeah. Now, do you think, because I know you were saying that you have like the chunk of timber that's in between, all these food sources that seem that aren't going to be around for this year, generally speaking, do you have, is there good acorns on your property? Do you think once like October hits and those, ag food sources typically as they go, dormant, or they start to transition and spend, quote unquote, the October lull, whenever they kind of head to the timber and they're finding plenty of food in there when the acorns start dropping, do you think that it might put you in the game again in that go around, or do you think that it's just going to be kind of a struggle for the year?
I do have a lot of acorns. And in years past, there was just so much food, they haven't really hit them too hard. But I definitely haven't given up all hope on my property. I've seen, especially closer to the rut, I've seen just massive cruisers come through. I haven't seen them in person, but just on trail cams.
Right.
And so, I mean, I know there's deer around, and I do have the doe on my property are pretty regular. So I'm just hoping that they kind of stick around. And I mean, shoot, in Iowa, if rut's going hot and heavy, anything could really happen. So
Right.
I'm not giving up all hope, but I definitely
It's going to be a little bit of a different ball game this year for you, I guess, is what it comes down to.
I don't think I will be patterning any bucks like I was last year on my property.
Right.
I will say that.
Right. Yeah, I'm hoping to capitalize on the anything can happen in Iowa rut this year. I'm like, if I could leave tomorrow, I would leave tomorrow to come out and sit in a tree.
What part of the state are you going to?
Zone wise, and it's funny because my buddy who usually co-hosts the show with me, he's from Iowa. And so when I talk about zones, it's like I don't think he knew the zones, because he's like, as a local, he's like, I don't know the zones. But it's zone 6. So it is in the southeast corner down near like Farmington area.
Okay.
I think, and then there's one other town, and I can't think of the name that starts with a C, that's down in that area. But it's down close. It's down by it's near the Des Moines River, and it's right across the border from Missouri. Essentially, is where I'm going to be.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the trip. But so let me ask you this: so how did you get started hunting? It's my daughter, I've been trying to get her into hunting, and we're doing our first deer hunt this year. And I'm always curious, because a lot of times, and it's not that it's correct, but just stereotypically, right? At least in my family growing up, and probably maybe not so much so, with a younger generation of folks. But you took the sons out hunting and stuff like that, and a lot of times, the daughters didn't get to go for whatever reason, whether they didn't show interest or they just weren't provided the opportunity because they didn't think they would like it or whatever. I'm curious how you got started into hunting. Was this like a family thing, or is it something you picked up later?
I definitely picked it up later. So growing up, my grandpa on my mom's side was a huge rifle hunter. And so always kind of, there was deer heads around, and you'd hear about deer hunts. And then on my dad's side, they had a family farm, and they didn't deer hunt, but just kind of split time between the city and the farm, and really just enjoyed being outdoors. And my dad took me fishing all the time. We were always going out to some of the local lakes here in town. And then I was actually married at the time, and my ex he had grown up hunting, but kind of got away from it. And then his brother was really getting into bow hunting, and really was like, you guys need to experience this. There's nothing like it. It's amazing. And just one day happened, his dad was like, you should try to pull my bow back. And so here I am. I've never drawn a bow. I'm trying to draw a bow that's a couple inches too long for me. It was probably set at 60 pounds. And so I'm struggling, but we put a paper plate up for the target, and I was getting the arrows in the plate. And I had, shotguns and stuff growing up, and
Right.
it just kind of felt like, as awkward as the bow was, it still just felt right.
Right.
Like it was one of those, like, I need to kind of explore this. Like, this is cool. And I was a college athlete growing up. I'm really competitive, and so I'm always kind of looking for, what can I kind of get my hands around and really challenge myself with. And at that time, it was like, this is the next thing that I can really start studying and becoming like a student of the game. And so that was kind of it. I think it was a few weeks later, I had bought my first bow, a Mission Flare, and was in the basement, had help from my brother-in-law at the time of shooting mechanics, but it was a lot of just self-learn, watching YouTube videos, videoing myself. And, thankfully I had that kind of athletic background where I could take various pieces of coaching and kind of internalize it and kind of work on things myself. And
Right.
And that's kind of how it got started. And then was taken out for my first hunt, and my first sit, I was by myself. So the only thing I was told was like where to aim, like nothing else. So it was completely like, I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there, and it was during the rut, and they gave me a set of antlers, and I'm still so new. I'm like, I clink them together. Okay. Like, I don't understand this, but
Right.
sure. So I'm sitting there in the stand down, kind of in this river bottom, and I hit those, the antlers together, and I had this buck come just flying over the hill. Looking
That's
back,
awesome.
It was a decent, not a monster, but it was a decent sized buck. And out loud, I said, "Holy expletive, because I had never seen, like, I didn't expect that at all. And
Right.
I was in such awe of what I was seeing. I didn't even think, even with yelling, it didn't spook the deer, but didn't even think to grab my bow.
Right.
I was so just in awe and overcome with just adrenaline that I couldn't think. I was just intent on watching this deer. And so I get in, and my ex-father-in-law is like, "Oh, what'd you see, this, that?" And he's like, "You didn't grab your bow?" I was like, "Nope, that was the furthest thing from my mind, but I guess next time that's kind of the point of why I'm out there." So
Right.
it's definitely been a lot of self-learning, and now that I've been divorced a while, of really just trying to figure it out. And I think a lot of us are in the same boat of, things change. Deer hunting is one of those things that's predictably unpredictable. And
Right.
I think you have to kind of just be okay with that. I do feel some people they feel like they have something to prove. And it's just one of those that I learn something every sit. I mean,
Yeah. 100%.
the minute you stop learning, I mean, I don't know if I ever got to that point. I don't know that I'd have the right passion, I guess, but that's
Right.
just how I look at it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's funny because I'll talk to people about, deer hunting at work and stuff like that. And it sounds like we're birds of a feather. It sounds like, to a degree, to where it's like, when you get me starting to talk about it, it's like I just go off the deep end. You know what I mean? And so I'm in the office, like, talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and I started talking about like thermals and this, that, the other. You know what I mean? And he's just looking at me, and he just stops and he goes, "I had no clue that it was that in depth," and it's one of those things where it's like, and when I say I think we might be birds of a feather to a degree, is that your job requires you to be very analytical and strategic, and my job, I work in marketing, and it's like I work a lot on like the strategy type of things. And so it's always perpetually asking that question, why? That's kind of what you're always are doing. And for me, like, the deer woods lets me kind of be strategic that way, where I get to kind of ask the question why, and kind of try to uncover things and understand why a deer is doing a certain thing, or why a terrain feature is working this year versus it, never worked before, or whenever you see a deer come running through in the rut, like, yes, is he chasing a doe, or why did he happen to run through here during that time of day? It's just like all those things that you never really answer. And I think never really being able to fully know that I've answered the question fully, I think is the thing that kind of continues to bring me back over and over again. Because no matter how hard you try or how long you've been doing it, you'll never perfect it. There is no perfect hunt. It doesn't exist. But I guess the attempt to try to find that perfect hunt, I think, is the thing that like kind of drives me and gets me excited every year, even though, I try to be regimented and I'm process oriented and stuff like that. So I have a lot of habits that I do that I'm very kind of neurotic about, that I have to do it in these steps type of thing. But deer hunting is one of those things where it's just kind of like out the window and I kind of freelance to a degree, which is nice. I wanted to ask you what sport did you play in college?
I played softball, and then I was lucky enough. Basketball was one of my main sports, and due to injury, went the softball route, and was really blessed to have the opportunity to play basketball in Spain and do some mission work after
Nice.
my undergraduate degree. So that was my overseas kind of part of my life. So basketball and softball were my main focus.
Right. I'm always curious whenever people are athletes, and just, I've talked about this with some buddies, because I grew up skateboarding, snowboarding. I wrestled growing up, was like the primary sport that I played. But a lot of skateboarding, a lot of snowboarding and stuff like that. And some of my buddies that we grew up similarly that are big time, deer hunters and just, super into it, DIY kind of guys or whatever, we've often had the conversation about how our kind of solo sport mentality that we had growing up, whether it was wrestling and it's a solo thing, or whether it's snowboarding and it's a solo thing, or whatever the case was, that like looking back on it, it's had a big influence in how I approach hunting. And they said that similarly, them too. Do you see any, I guess, similarities or things that you took from your days, competing in athletics that you carry over into deer hunting that helps you?
Your like routine, I think, I know once I get to a stand, anything can really happen. But up until that point, I'm super OCD. Like my scent game, how I get to the stand, wind. I mean, all of that. It's very regimented. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, like when I have like a failed hunt, like if I'm busted or maybe they caught my wind or something like that. It's that mindset, I think, of being an athlete, of being able to shake it off. Mm-hmm. I've had a few poor shots, and I think if you hunt long enough, you're eventually, unfortunately, going to have those shots, no matter how much you practice. And having that mindset of just being able to get back out there, of not letting it stop you. In a mm-hmm. game, if you have the air or you miss the final shot, it really gets you down and it weighs on you, but you just kind of have to have that fortitude and mental toughness to push on and really kind of block that out the next time you're out there. And I think that really helps me. Like when I do have even just unproductive hunts where I don't see anything and I'm like, was it my scent? Was I moving too much? Was I doing this? Like just not letting that get the best of me, of believing in myself, and the next time I hit the stand, of really being able to block right. those previous hunts out and trying to focus on the positives.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we collectively kind of said, and this again is like, wrestling, my buddies were like BMXers, skateboarders, and snowboarders and stuff like that are also big hunters. It was for us, the way we kind of looked at it, because the sports for us were very much solo missions. And, for example, like snowboarding or skateboarding or wrestling or whatever it is, but especially like X Games sports, like snowboarding, skateboarding, like when you're trying to perfect a trick, like you fail at it 1,000 times before you land it. You know what I mean? And you're just chasing that one time you land it when it feels perfect, And to me, deer hunting was kind of the same way, where it was like the failure rate is super high. It's like, mm-hmm. You're going to fail like 9 times out of 10. Or when I say fail, it doesn't mean that you did something wrong per se. It just meant that you came home with an unfilled tag or whatever. And failure's a bit subjective, but we'll use that as like our parameters. But it was that ability to kind of understand that like failure has to happen undoubtedly to succeed. You know what I mean? Like no one ever picks anything up and succeeds every time at it, And so it was that kind of like mindset, that aggressive kind of mindset and idea that my one buddy kills world-class animals almost every year, but that's like what drives him, is that like that, I failed 10 times, but it's like, I'm going to continue to pursue and grind, and I'm going to get it done. I'm going to make it happen. It's that kind of mentality that, in his opinion, pushes him over the top, which is kind of interesting. So I'm always interested to see athletes that get into hunting, and how that kind of plays out. But you also transitioned that kind of competitive stuff into archery shooting, correct? Do you shoot, if I'm not mistaken, you shoot competitively, right?
I do a little bit. Work has really made that a bit difficult. I'll go to local 3Ds. I've shot at a few of the bigger 3D tournaments. I potentially might go to the Lancaster Classic this year. I went to Winter Cam, the indoor 3D shoot, a couple years back. I try to make it to as many as I can, especially here local, but would really, really like to start getting into that a little bit more, just for that challenge, and to be to ensure that I'm really prepared when I do hit the stand in the fall.
Right. Yeah. That's one thing for me. I think in the past, I would say probably 3 years, that I've like become obsessive about shooting my bow. To the point now, it's like I'm getting into more and more like my setups and stuff like that. Like, I never used to build my own arrows. Now I build my own, build all my own stuff. I never used to tune my own bow. I have a buddy of mine who's a killer archer, wins competitive tournaments, he's kind of been my archery sensei, if you will, when I kind of wanted to get serious about when I wanted to get serious about shooting. Like we went out and we shot together, and I was like, don't criticize me until we get off the 3D course. And then when we get back to the bags, let me know what you've seen, and let's talk about how I can fix some of this stuff. And we did that. And like, it's gone from like fixing my form, which, fortunately he was like, you don't have a bunch of bad habits to break. He's like, it's not terrible. He's like, there's a few small things, made me more accurate, to where now it's using, back tension to release, you know what I mean? Like the whole transition from, an evolution of, I guess, an archer, if you will. And so he usually does my bow setups for me, but then I built a DIY like paper tuning setup here, so I can do a little bit of tuning myself. And I finally can trust my own tuning. So it's one of those things, man, where it's, I don't shoot competitively ever. I think it's the latter point of just wanting to be ready when I'm on the stand, I think is really kind of why I do it, wanting to make sure I can take an ethical shot and be accurate. So, but I want to transition and talk a little bit more specifically about hunting. And this was part of what you and I were talking about when we had our initial conversation months ago. And one thing you mentioned, when you were talking about like, what might have went wrong with the hunt, you were like, was my wind bad? Did I get winded, or whatever the case might be? And I never thought of like some of these things until you started mentioning them when we were chatting. But, being a woman in hunting, right? It's, you may not have a lot of peers or as many as guys do. And I don't think guys really take into consideration like how different it can be for a woman to hunt, similarly to how a guy does it. And I'm not saying from like a physical perspective, because I'm a believer that, a woman can hunt just as hard as a guy can, and can kill just as big of a deer, or grind just as hard. Like all those things, in my opinion, are equal. But there are some considerations that have to kind of be made, that you have to make, that your guy friends don't have to. And so I want you to kind of talk about some of those and kind of how you prep for a hunt and those considerations, because it was kind of interesting when we were chatting. I just think it'd be kind of cool for everyone to kind of hear it.
Yeah, so that has definitely been one of the areas that I've had to learn along the way. I actually don't have any kind of female friends hunt around me. Like I have girlfriends, of course, who I'm quote unquote friends with on social media and all of that, but that live around me, that I meet up with, I don't have any of those. And so it has been a challenge of like, okay, well, I see so-and-so is showering with this scent-free stuff. Okay, I have really long, thick hair, and after the first season of doing this, I'm going to get my hair cut, and my stylist is like, what have you done to your hair? Like, your hair is destroyed. I was like, oh, well, I use this shampoo like all season. She was like, did you not realize how dry your hair was and all this? And I was like, well, yeah, but I guess I didn't pay a ton of attention. Like, I knew it got super tangled all the time and all of that. And so I think just for starters, just having long hair, and I'm still on the fence. I'm doing some experimenting this year. Last year, before every hunt, I would wash my hair with scent-free shampoo. Outside of so a month before season, I actually start using scent-free and hypoallergenic shampoo and conditioner, but not the like hunting stuff.
Yep.
That is a little bit more harsh. So I try to help my hair out as much as I can. But before every hunt last year, I would wash my hair and I'd actually go out to the field with wet hair. And I've really been trying to find the happy medium, because if you're in the stand long enough or you start to sweat or it's hot out, when you have wet hair in a braid or in a bun or anything, like the inside of it kind of starts to smell. So I've been toying with do I just wash it the night before with the scent stuff and then spray it down really good with field spray, or what is I don't know. I still don't know what the best solution is for women's hair out in the outdoors. I do know I killed both of my bucks last year with wet hair. I don't know if that
wet hair is the way to go then.
Yeah, I don't know if it was because I had killed a buck with day before washed hair, and then come January when I'm out hunting. I mean, I was trying to fill a doe tag this last year. It was like 0 degrees and I had ice hanging off my hair, and I was like, well, this is no fun.
Right.
So just like hair in general has been really tough. And then one thing I didn't know, I've wanted to do an article on this. I've started it. I need to finish it. I was UV testing some clothes just to see how much UV different brands, like the camo patterns, give off.
Right.
And so I'm in my bathroom. It's pitch dark. I have my UV light shining it, and I just so happened to like glance over my hair, and because I'm getting older, my hair is getting darker, and I prefer it to be more blonde to make me feel younger. And highlighted hair glows, at least mine does. I don't know if it depends on the chemicals you highlight it with, their color, but for some reason, my blonde highlighted hair glows like crazy under a UV light. It's like if you're standing under a black light in a white t-shirt. Jeez. And so, I mean, I've always worn a hat in the stand, but when you're looking on social media, you see some of these doing air quotes, huntresses with their bleach blonde hair in the stand that's down, and they're not wearing a hat, and
it's like a big white flag.
I'm like, you might as well put like a big siren above your tree stand that's like, hey dear, I am right here.
Right.
So I mean, thankfully I always wear a hat, but that's something I just never knew. And I like took pictures and I sent them to my guy friends, and they're like, yeah, I would have never thought of like telling you to check that or do anything,
right.
To even consider that. And so those were two of the biggest things. And then I think also is, I don't know a girl who doesn't love a good tree stand selfie, but like makeup in itself has scent in it. So typically, like when I go out, there is not like if I'm just going out for like doe and whatever, like I'll keep some makeup on. I don't intentionally take it off. Right. I won't intentionally put it on, but I won't get my face down to, I guess, like bare as bare can be. And so yeah, when I go out for my hunts, it is absolutely no makeup. Every ounce of hair on my head is either in a beanie or in a hat. And so those were just things that over time I was like, oh, I really need to pay attention to these, because again, it's just not stuff that or advice I was given, because guys just don't have those issues. And then I will say I've actually seen a lot of posts lately on some of the like female hunting pages I've been on Facebook this fall about like how do females successfully pee in a stand. And so people have been posting like various products, and then some have like someone will post one and then another girl will chime in and be like, oh, I tried that one and actually like ended up covered in pee, so might not want to do that one. And so I haven't started exploring that realm, but I think with some of the all-day sits I'll have this fall, I'm going to have to figure something out, because hopping down and getting all those layers off, it's just not the most feasible or efficient. So,
Right.
So more to come on that, but it has been very interesting to see so many girls. Like, we all obviously have this issue, and there's not one just easy solution.
Right. I'll have to find out what my wife has, because she has these things that she takes, that she has them in like the glove box of my truck, the glove box of her car for when we're traveling and stuff like that. That way, if she has to go, and we can pull alongside the road, and they're pretty clever and pretty convenient. And my 11-year-old daughter uses them too. So it's like, I know that they are easy to use and do work, because she would end up making a mess if not.
Yeah.
So I'll have to figure. I'll ask her what they are, and then I'll text you and let you know, because it seems like it might be the solution that you're looking for, and they're pretty cheap on Amazon. So
Perfect.
I'm making a note. I'm putting down pea cups. That way I remember to do that.
Awesome.
So, all right, I want to shift gears here along the same kind of vein, but you mentioned, huntress, the word huntress, which kind of evokes a certain kind of, I think, thought, process for most folks. So I just want to ask you, and we can take this wherever we want to go, but do you feel that women in general in hunting, and I love like the more that women get involved in hunting, the better. And like, I think even though hunter numbers are going down, and don't quote me on this, but I feel like I read somewhere where actually female hunters are going up, because they're getting more interested in like the organic, clean proteins and et cetera. So they're interested in hunting, and not just deer hunting, but all types. But I want to ask you if you feel like women in general, in hunting, represent themselves well on the whole or not. What are your thoughts?
I feel like the truly authentic hunters who happen to be female really represent themselves well. I don't think it takes more than scrolling through an Instagram feed to quickly identify if someone's authentic, or if someone's doing it for just the likes or promotion or pushing product or something like that. So I do feel the girls who are just really getting out there and getting it done and grinding and putting in the work, they're doing a pretty good job of representing themselves. I have seen kind of girls who are truly authentic, but maybe feel to get Insta famous or whatever, that they need to fit into this mold. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, you're authentic. Like, you don't have to kind of go that path of posting really staged pictures, or maybe more provocative pictures, or posting tree stand selfies with your hair down and tons of makeup on, because everyone knows you're more than likely not going to kill a deer that way. You might get lucky,
right.
But like just that kind of stuff. And it has, I think in the last couple of years, I've even seen the guys who hunt become more annoyed with this as well, which is, I don't know if makes me feel better is a good thing, but like the fact that guys are like, they see through it. It's like they're kind of just annoyed as well. I mean, annoyed is a strong word, but I will admit, like when I see some super stage posts, or like the other day I saw a picture of, and if I sent it to a few people so people know who it is, so I'm not trying to be the B word, but there's this girl in Texas like posing with doves in the middle of Texas in sandals.
Right.
And I was like, are you like are you rattlesnake proof? Like, why are you in like a field in the middle of Texas and
Right.
like flip flops and like clearly you brought a change of clothes to take pictures
Right.
of like after the hunt, which I don't know. I'm just kind of a country girl anyway, and that's something that never crosses my mind. I get that there are girls who really take pride in the way they look and the way they present themselves, but that one to me was the most recent one where I was just like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
you're wearing sandals in like rattlesnake country. Like that makes no sense to me.
Selling sandals. That's what's happening there.
Yeah, like just stuff like that, or
Yeah.
like you can always tell. There's been some posts lately where it's been the guys getting on pictures of girls where like their girl's front arm is super bent, like clearly their draw is far too short. And
right.
I mean, I think I've seen that a lot lately where I just saw pictures the other day. The girl, her string was between like the crease of her nose and her face, and then her front arm was bent like 4 inches.
Right.
But yet there she was promoting, I don't know what it was.
Insert name brand bow here.
Yeah, and it was just like anyone who's truly like a hunter is like, I don't know, it could be different for guys because unfortunately like in any realm of product, sex sells.
Yeah.
But as a woman, I don't like, yes, there are very attractive male hunters, like very attractive. But if they're pushing a product, I'm not like, oh, I'm going to go buy that product because this hot guy is pushing it.
Right.
I'm like, what can it do for me? How's it going to benefit me in the field? Like, what's the cost comparison?
Yep.
Like, I don't know. So I still, even from a company perspective, I'm like, what kind of revenue are you making off? Like, you're putting money into these quote unquote huntresses, but like, are you truly seeing money? Because I think everyone gets it by now. Like,
yeah, that's the thing that I've always
out there getting it done.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've always wondered too, because I've had some buddies who work in the industry for some larger brands, and one of them I talked to pretty candidly about it, just like, what's up with and he was like, we don't touch them. He's like, he's like, I honestly don't know how it works for some of these companies. Basically saying what you're saying. He's like, I don't understand like how there's a return there. He's like, because anyone who knows anything kind of recognizes that it's a farce at best. You know what I mean? But I think you have to take into consideration, just the sheer, like a numbers play, right? Like if there's 15 million hunters, in the U.S. ish, give or take 11 million, whatever it is nowadays. I think it's 11, right? What percentage of that are like hardcore hunters that really kind of like do the dissecting and studying, what gear they're going to buy and, et cetera, right? And what percentage of them are just going to go basically on memory recall when they walk into Cabela's? You know what I mean? And buy the first thing that they can remember that they saw. And if it was like memorable because it was some girl and scantily clad holding something, it's like that guy's probably going to remember that. You know what I mean? And it's not even that they trust it necessarily, but it's just more of a general awareness, is probably how I would look at it. But I also think like, hunting doesn't do like women any favors in that regard either, because they're the ones also kind of pushing the narrative to a degree. You know what I mean? So, sometimes ladies are out there and just like, if you're borderline into hunting, you don't really care, but you have an Instagram following and someone says, hey, I'll give you X amount of dollars to post this for this year and do this for me. It's like, you're like, well, whatever. And it's like, cool. Yeah, I'll make a couple bucks. And so, like, you don't really care. Like, you don't have any attachment to it. You know what I mean? So, I think that hunting doesn't do the industry any favors in that regard. And I will also say that type of thing I don't feel is only reserved for women either. I think nowadays you see plenty of Insta-famous dudes in hunting doing the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's on both sides, and that I have noticed more, I'd say, in the last year or so, where it's the guy version of a huntress where they are decked out, all the name brand stuff, maybe have, a substantial following, and you look and it's like, have you harvested anything? Like,
Right.
like what? You just take pictures of yourself in this gear or very staged picture. I mean, it's essentially the same thing, just yes, or in the gym. And so yeah, I've definitely seen it, and as frustrating for me as just the because my goal has never been and will never be to quote unquote make it in the industry. I made a post the other day. If social media didn't exist, I would be out here doing the exact same thing day in and day out. It would not change my routine. It would not change my passions. I would be living the completely same life. And excuse me. I just I've known, so for me, it does get frustrating to see girls who don't have that drive and passion, maybe get free product or go on various hunts or get sponsored by a company that I've been trying to work with for 4 years that can't even get their attention.
Right.
But I've talked to enough guys who are far more knowledgeable than me, way more knowledgeable, have so many more hunts under their belt. There's one guy in particular that I was really good friends with, was fortunate enough to go on a few hunts with, and learned just a tremendous amount. And because he didn't fit that mold of what companies were looking for, he couldn't get any, he was just trying to write very informative articles, wanting to do videos, and wasn't really looking for anything in return. He was just wanting to share the knowledge that he had gained over so many years, and companies wouldn't even talk with him.
Yep.
And I was like, holy smokes, here's this guy that I could listen, he could just give lectures on hunting, essentially. And so, I mean, I get frustrated, but I can only imagine for even guys who are far more knowledgeable and more experienced than me, that frustration kind of carries over. But I think, kind of to my point, the saving grace and all of that is, at the end of the day, I'd still be doing what I'm doing. So yeah, I get frustrated, but then it's that's not why I'm doing this. So I can't let that kind of jade my vision.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've always said, people ask me about being quote unquote, in the hunting industry, and I even hate even saying the word or the two words together, because I don't really consider myself to be in the realm. I have a podcast that I run, and I still have a day job, and that's how I make my living. So I don't really consider myself to be in the quote unquote industry. I feel like I'm kind of on the periphery of it for the most part, kind of observing things that happen, and maybe have a little closer of a seat to kind of watch what happens. But it's interesting because, I started this just basically because I wanted to meet people, right? And then it's gone now for going on 4 years, and I have some folks that I work with, but they're all people that I know that are friends, you know what I mean? And that's kind of where I've kept it. Because I've been to the ATA stuff where you talk to different brands and stuff like that. And you can tell who's genuine and who's not. For me, it's relationship building. If I'm going to do something with somebody, I don't want to just do it once. I want to do it and have a relationship, because number one, I like you, and that's first and foremost, right? Because if I don't like you, I don't want to really do anything with you, business wise or otherwise. And so that's kind of my first litmus test is do I like you? And if the answer is yes, then it's we can move to the second phase of that is do I believe in your product? And if that answer is yes, then awesome. Then the next one is, do I feel like it would benefit me in a hunting scenario? It's and if the answer is yes, then it's I try it. And then if I try it and it works effectively as I would like it to work, then I can get behind it. And that's kind of my approach. And that's I guess the long way of me saying that, I'll never be a hunting celebrity. Essentially.
Yeah, no, but that's I've kind of turned down working with companies or stopped using products for that reason. When I'm out in the woods, if I'm not 100% confident in it, I don't care if, someone tried to like give me all the free product I could ever imagine or give me a little bit of a stipend. Like, it doesn't matter. If I'm not confident with it or like the people behind the brand, kind of to your point, like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be taking it with me, and I'm not going to be promoting anything I don't truly believe in.
Right. So I want to shift gears here now and talk a little bit about, because I wanted to get to this, and I know we're running up on an hour, so I want to dive into it. So I want to ask you pointedly, how was your season last year? And I have a point for asking about this because I want to dive into the analytics aspect of things from your profession and how it relates to deer hunting. So first off, just high level, how was your season? And then we'll jump in a little further.
Yeah, so last year, it will definitely be a year to remember and a year to beat. It definitely, I feel the pressure this year, but yeah, I was fortunate enough on, I forget, it was like 7 days, I think, into the season, harvested a beautiful 6x7 buck. I think the gross score was around 163 inches. And then 7 days later, almost to the hour, in Iowa, I have a landowner's tag and a state archery tag. Went out with my state archery tag to one of my buddies' farm, and almost to the minute harvested a really nice, I forget what he was, might have been a 5x4, smaller rack, but just horse of a body. And then for deer, those were my 2 bucks. Harvested. Everyone called it like an elk whitetail hybrid doe, just an absolute monster of a doe. And then because I had filled my buck tags so early, I was blessed enough to go down to Florida and chase some gators and hogs. But
nice.
Yeah, that 6x7 was
that's a hammer.
It was. I still kind of am in shock that it all kind of came together. I don't know that will ever kind of sink in. Even seeing them up on my wall every day, it's hard to believe.
Right. So which one, because I want to, well, let me just ask it this way. I know, as you'd mentioned, your career path and what you do for a living is very analytical. And so I want to kind of get a sense of how that analytical approach to your work also filters into your deer hunting. I guess give me some examples of how that happens.
Yeah, so the 6x7 was the buck I would say I truly patterned. I know, again, deer are predictably unpredictable, but I truly feel I patterned that. When I went out that night, I've never had the sense like I am going to kill this animal, and I just knew. And so that buck, what I started doing, and I know their patterns change and their ranges change depending on the season, but I started taking, once their antler growth was substantial, I started kind of taking catalog of what bucks would potentially be shooters. And last year was really kind of the first year I took it to this level. And so every single time I had that buck on camera, I wrote down the location, the time, the temperature. I mean, all the information I could get from my trail camera pictures on that buck, and just kind of analyze those patterns over the summer, over the fall. And then it seems like in October, they just kind of vanish. They do out here anyway. And so I was like, okay, I need to catch him at the beginning of October before he just becomes a ghost, like so many deer I've had on my property have. And September, I kind of start taking all this data and then taking the data from September and really trying to look at the patterns of, was it night or day? Was he showing up in daylight? What was the moon phase? What was the pressure? What was the temperature? And I started noticing that towards the end of September, I want to say it was I don't remember the exact, if it was like 2 on, 2 off, 3 on, 1 off, but he had a pattern that it was every so many days he was walking in front of this camera about the same time, and then he'd be on this other camera, which made me feel like he was coming out of his daytime bed and moving like north on my property. And so through that, I was able to pick up on that pattern of how often he was showing up in daylight. And I don't know if I have all the data still, but I mean, I had it with the temps, the moon phase, everything, and just really noticed the on and off cycle. And so I knew, I forget what day, I think it was a Monday, opening day was, and I knew that was going to be his off day. And so I didn't sit then, but I had sat the night before to, I didn't have my bow or anything. I was just scouting and getting a feel. I had built a blind on like this dock, and I wanted to make sure everything was set where I needed it, and I was ready for game time. And so I'd sat the night before, and sure enough, like clockwork, there he comes strolling in. I was like, all right. So I went out that Friday, and I knew that was his off day, but again, I'm not gonna not go out. Right. You know, who knows what could happen. So I get out there, saw a few deer, and then the next day I was like, all right, it's game time. And so sure enough, that pattern, he came. I heard, you could hear him because he kind of circles around and then comes in from the north to the south. And that's what his patterns had shown, kind of when he was on various cameras, that was the way he was going. So I heard him going to my south, getting ready to come back up north, and I didn't see him for a while. So my initial thought was like he winded me, anything like that. But sure enough, I mean, to the minute, if I could have bet the minute he came in, I was in that ground blind, and I just saw the tips of the antlers, and I was like, yep, that's him. It's game time. And I knew it was him, and it was, gosh, maybe 12, 15 yard shot from the ground blind I had set up. And I truly feel like having all of that data really helped have that successful hunt. And, you know, we didn't have the flooding. I was able to watch him kind of all year. I had a food plot in that area that I had started in the spring that I felt kind of really helped hold him in that area. And then on the other side of the property, it was corn. And so I felt he was moving through the corn and then coming back onto mine. And so kind of that data aspect really, really helped me, I feel, kind of predict where he was going to be.
Right. And what time did you arrow him? Was it evening?
Yeah, it was evening. It was just maybe like 15 minutes before sunset. So he liked to push that boundary, and that was my only concern the later in the season, that he was going to be coming in too late, but thankfully got him.
Right. Nice.
Got him early.
So you feel like you were probably pretty close to his daytime bed then? Like if he was showing up with a little bit of daylight, sounds like you were pretty close.
Yeah, I think there's like a couple areas on my property, just because I know there's beds that I just don't go in. They're just kind of off limits. I've thought about putting cameras and stuff, but for me, I don't know. I just haven't touched them.
Right.
And I really was confident that he was bedding close by, and that was kind of the one way to catch him, because he had tons of corn he could hide in that bordered my property. And I was like, if I don't get him when he's, you know, it's going to be close to either sunrise or sunset, I'll never see him, because he'll just go hang out in the corn all day.
Right. What now, were you just using like some type of like Excel spreadsheet to track all this? Is that what you were?
Yeah. So I did all in Excel. I joked around. I have a few programmer buddies that they should create a program to do it all for me, but their cost was too high for my blood, so I couldn't do that. But yeah, just manually in Excel, and I mean that's pretty. It doesn't even take really an analyst background to to see trends and patterns with bucks. Like if you have a property that you have food plots on that's well established, I mean, I don't know that every buck is truly patternable, but I feel it kind of gives you, if you're running trail cameras and checking them, you might as well get some of the data off of them instead of just for cataloging your deer.
Anything you can do to try to tip the odds. Now I'm going to ask you a nerd question. You ready? Did you make a pivot table? That's my question.
I did not. I thought about so I'm big into SQL and writing code, and I did think of like doing a temporary table and sorry, I've lived near train track, but yeah, I did think of like writing code so I could pull various dates and like make Tableau views and charts and graphs and all of that crazy stuff.
Now there is I use this thing. I'm using it this year because there's a couple deer. Like so now for me in Pennsylvania, it's like I may or may not get deer. I kind of watch deer try to over a course of like a year or two, whatever. And I usually try to watch terrain features because for me around this area, like deer don't make it several years. A lot of times when I find them as a good deer, chances are they probably won't make it to the next year just because of the pressure in the area that I live and stuff. So but when I do get a deer that I might be able to watch for like a year, 1 year to the next or whatever, I usually use, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but it's called Deer Lab. And it's actually it's a buddy of mine, this guy, John, that I'm good friends with. He developed this guy. He's a developer by nature, by trade. And so he created this program that you basically upload like your trail camera photos, and it basically pulls all the data from like the closest weather center. And then it pulls in like moon phase, temperature, wind direction, anything. And it'll actually make heat maps for where you're seeing that buck most frequently on a property across multiple cameras. Once you plot them, it'll then show you like where he's showing up most often. So you can basically filter by like profile. If you call a deer like the big six, or, the big six, or like, the big 10 or whatever he is, you can filter by that profile and it'll show you just the data around him. And then you can go and look at like some tables and it'll say, 75% of the time, I can just look at him for one camera and say 75% of the time when he passes this camera, it's on a north wind. And you can start to pull it apart like that. So similar to what you're doing, only it's like he has a program for it. So if you ever want to check it out, like it's worth kind of looking into.
Yeah, I think I have actually looked at that a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Like I'm a little bit of a closet nerd, so I like to look at data and stuff like that. I like charts. I like Excel. It's like a weird thing that I have, I guess. But again, we're birds of a feather. Who would have thunk it?
Yep.
Right? But so what are your plans for this year?
So with the flooding and really not seeing much on camera, I was traveling a ton this summer for work, and when I could, I was using some of the mapping programs out there to just look at terrain. And what I actually did was I put together a letter. I live out in the country. If someone that I don't know is driving up my driveway, I'm probably having a firearm very close by because I don't know their motive. So for me, I felt writing letters was less intrusive, being out in the country to ask for permission to hunt. I know a lot of people go door to door, but just from personal experience, I feel more comfortable with letters. And so I did just a ton of scouting based on terrain and farm ground and just various parts kind of around where I live that would be convenient enough where I could do a couple hour sits or day sit, but not have to like stay the night. And for the areas that didn't flood, and then I looked at some of the areas more in the bluff because I have a feeling that's where a lot of the deer have gone. So I sent about 30 letters out, and I was actually fortunate enough that 6 individuals contacted me back and gave me permission to bow hunt their property.
Nice.
So the last couple weeks I've been hitting these properties pretty hard, just trying to scout them, figure out stand location, going out tomorrow night to one property to get a stand up, and then have probably 10 more stands to try to get hung before, October 1st. So this year will definitely be a challenge and out of my realm comfort-wise. Last year again, using kind of the analytics and knowing what was out there, I felt really confident. And this year I'm really just having to keep that open mindset of anything could happen. And even if, because I've never stepped foot on any of these places until a couple weeks ago. And so I'm learning the trails and looking, right, trying to figure out pinch points and various areas where I can just get a sense of the deer that are out there. And so I think going into the season, just keeping in mind that even if, I'm not seeing anything on camera, there doesn't mean there's deer out there. And if I have to make a change mid-season because of a stand location, to just be okay and roll with it. Like I'm typically, everything is ready a month before season, and here I am. I still have 10 stands to hang on terrain that I've scouted for maybe a couple hours. So,
right.
So it's definitely going to be a challenge. I'm getting really excited because, again, it's Iowa. Yeah. And you truly never know when something just crazy is going to happen and some monster is going to walk out. So I'm really challenging myself to not get discouraged at the amount of work I have left, to stay positive, to stay optimistic, that although I'm completely out of my comfort zone, that maybe that's what I need in my life right now, of just really being challenged in different ways. And again, I do it to learn something every time I'm out, and I've had just a ton of learning in the last couple of weeks looking at different properties that I don't know. And one of the properties I'm actually hunting out of season doe depredation tags on, and nice. And I set up a stand that I thought was going to be awesome just due to tracks. And I sat twice and didn't see anything. And here this farmer is, he's getting out of season doe depredation tags because there's so many deer. And I sit for 8 hours total and I don't see a deer. And so I was like, all right, time out. Like, right. What the heck? Tons of tracks, put up the trail camera. Oh, this is, for whatever reason, it's a morning spot. They're probably going to alfalfa across the road. There's no beds around here. Okay, what's the next plan of attack? So right. Like in corporate America, I work in kind of an agile environment where we iterate. Yeah. We're always iterating on different things and making changes. So I was like, I'm truly going to have to take an iterative approach to my hunting this year where, you know what, that was a terrible idea. So let's go back to the drawing board and figure out
a new plan.
Kind of the next step. And so, yeah, I am nervous, but very, very excited. Some of these properties I feel good about, just seeing some of the trail camera pictures and sign. I feel they have the potential to produce some incredible deer. So we shall see what the season holds.
Nice. I wanted to say, you have 10 tree stands to hang yet. And I wanted to say, have you ever thought of giving a saddle a try?
One of my good friends is going to laugh hysterically because we have had this discussion because he has one and he's been like pushing it on me and he brings it over every time and he shows me how great it is. And I don't know why I'm so hesitant with it. I think I just need to get out and hunt with it.
Just sit in it, like in the yard on a tree. Cause I switched last year and it is like, I won't hunt out of anything else now. Like that's just all there is to it, because a lot of what I hunt is public ground. And I'm like you said, it's like, I have to iterate a lot because I might show up somewhere where a guy just walked through and now I'm onto a new spot. Like I got to move, you know what I mean? Or whatever the case is. Right. And so I definitely don't pre-hang anything because I don't want anything to get stolen or anything like that. But I'm able to be super light that way. When I have to iterate, it's like, I've got some modded sticks that are short, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. So it's like my setup all in, if I don't take any camera equipment or anything, it's probably like, I want to say maybe 8 pounds, something like that in total. So whenever you need to like iterate and kind of freelance a bit, it's really convenient for that. And you don't have to buy 10 tree stands. You can buy one saddle and hunt wherever you want to hunt. So I'm selling you on it too.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think I think it would kind of also alleviate the stress of like, oh my gosh, I have to hang 10 stands. And now it's just like, hey, instead of hanging 10 stands, since I'll be a few of the properties I have, there will be other hunters, but a few it's just me. Like, hey, if I pick out good trees, I can just
they'll never know.
Go out there and do it that way, and don't have to worry about trying to. So okay, I might be sold. I'll have him bring it over and I'll actually sit in it next time.
There you go. I love it. But I know we've been talking for a little bit more than an hour, and I want to be sensitive to your time and let you have a little bit of your evening here. And I have a huge client meeting tomorrow that I actually have to try to get some real sleep for tonight, as opposed to like my not normal sleep. But before I let you go, if you wouldn't mind, let folks out there know where they can find out more about you, follow you, and just kind of stay in touch with you throughout your hunting season.
Yeah, of course. So on Instagram, I know it's a bit confusing because of my divorce. I've kept my Instagram handle with my married name. So Instagram, I am Bauer Lindsey, BAUERLINDSEY. And then on Facebook, my profile is pretty locked down. I don't have a public page. But on Facebook, I am under Lindsey Zastrow, Zastrow. Those are the two places I'm really posting content. You'll see some articles of mine on like bow hunter dye and stuff. But Instagram and Facebook are where you can follow along.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. I'm glad we finally got to do this. It's been a pleasure having you on, and good luck this season. And let's stay in touch, and we'll do a little saddle talking. If you need, I can give you some pointers.
All right. Perfect. No, I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank Lindsey for joining. Be sure to give her a follow on Instagram for some honest hunting and fishing content. Of course, I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And hell, while you're at it, be sure to follow us on Instagram so you can kind of keep up with what's happening this year for all of my hunts. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, Gumleaf USA Boots, Obsession Bows, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
On my heels, makes me proud, makes me steal. I could show you through the door. I ain't welcome anymore. And long time coming, if it all, it takes a special knowing to color for. Damaged heads, broken letters, rationalize yourself in numbers, but